like a blade. Claire sat with her back pressed against the seat, her fingers locked around the edge of the cushion. The yacht was gone now, swallowed by darkness and ocean wind, but the voice still echoed inside her head. Claire, you forgot to say goodbye. Amy had not stopped shaking. Chad sat beside her, one arm wrapped around her shoulders, Amy's bag still at his feet. Richard sat across from Claire, watching her like he wanted to say something, but every word stayed trapped behind his fear. Eve was quiet, too quiet. She sat near the front of the helicopter, her face turned toward the window, her eyes fixed on the black sky ahead. Claire already knew who she was, Richard's mother, the woman who had walked into the safe room and changed everything. But now, after the voice came through the radio, Claire realized something else. Eve had heard it too, and she had not panicked. She had not screamed. She had not even flinched. That frightened Claire more than if Eve had been afraid, because whatever followed them from the yacht, Eve knew it, and Eve was preparing for war. The flight felt endless. The ocean disappeared beneath them, replaced by thick forest and rolling black hills. Trees stretched in every direction, bending beneath the storm like they were bowing to something unseen. Then the forest opened. Claire leaned toward the helicopter window. Below them stood a mansion hidden deep in the woods. No, not a mansion. A fortress. Tall stone walls rose from the earth. Iron gates guarded the entrance. Towers and sharp rooftops cut into the night sky. Warm light glowed behind long windows, but the glow did not comfort Claire. It made the house look alive, beautiful, eerie, ancient. Every stone looked placed by hands that cared, feared, and remembered. It was too grand to be a safe house, too old to be ordinary. Then Claire noticed movement below. At first she thought it was the trees shifting in the wind, but it was not the trees. People stood along the walls. Some waited at the iron gates. Others moved through the courtyard below. More watched from balconies, high windows, their faces still, their eyes fixed on the helicopter as it descended. Claire's fingers tightened around the seat. There were so many of them, silent, waiting, guarding. This was not only a house, it was a compound, a hidden kingdom in the woods. Richard looked down at it, his jaw tight. Amy whispered, "What is this place?" Eve finally turned. Home. No one spoke after that. The helicopter landed behind the estate, inside a wide stone courtyard surrounded by walls high enough to keep the world out or keep something in. The moment Claire stepped out, the air felt different, colder, heavier. The rain had stopped, but the trees around the property still moved, whispering in the dark. Guards stood at every entrance. Some looked human, some did not. Claire could feel their eyes on her as she crossed the courtyard. No one bowed, no one smiled, but every face carried the same quiet understanding. They had been expecting her. That was the worst part. Eve led them toward the mansion. She did not walk through the courtyard like someone returning after a long night. She moved like a queen returning to her throne. Every shadow seemed to make room for her. Every door opened before she touched it. Inside, the great hall rose above them with carved ceilings, old portraits, marble floors, and a massive fireplace burning with golden light. But Claire barely noticed the beauty at first because the hall was full of people. Men and women stood along the staircase, beneath the portraits, beside the tall doors, and near the fireplace. No one rushed forward. No one spoke. They only watched. So many faces, so many dark eyes, waiting to meet her. Claire felt Richard step closer beside her. Amy reached for Chad's hand. Eve looked over the guarded room as if every person there had already been told this moment was coming. Then she turned to Claire. Welcome home. Claire's heart fumbled. Home. The word should have felt warm. Instead, it felt like a door closing behind her. She looked around the great hall again. The house was beautiful, but it carried the silence of something that had watched generations come and go. The portraits on the wall seemed to stare down at her. Men and women with pale skin, dark eyes, and the same quiet power Richard carried in his face. Claire had known Richard's family was different. He had told her the truth in pieces, that they were vampires, but not the kind from old stories. They did not hunt people. They did not kill to survive. They could eat, walk beneath the sun, laugh, love, and live beside the world without destroying it. Amy had told her the same thing. They don't kill people, Claire. Not this family. But standing inside Eve's house, Claire realized there was a difference between knowing what they were and knowing how far back they went. Claire turned slowly toward Richard. How long has this house been here? Richard looked at Eve. Eve removed her gloves one finger at a time, longer than most countries remember their kings. Claire's stomach tightened. Amy stepped closer to Chad. Claire looked around the hall again, the portraits, the locked doors, the strange symbols carved in the staircase, the guards watching from the edges of the room, the feeling that this house was listening. Then she looked back at Eve. You brought us here for a reason. Eve's expression softened, but not enough to comfort her. Yes. Claire's voice trembled. What does your family want from me? Richard's face changed. That was when Claire knew it was not only about saving her. It had never only been about saving her. The fire crackled behind them. Eve stepped closer. We want what every ancient family wants, she said quietly. Claire swallowed. A future. The words settled over the room like a curse. Claire looked at Richard, but he could not hold her eyes. Her heart began to pound. What future? Eve's voice lowered. You are not here because you are weak, Claire. You are here because you can survive what others could not. Claire's breath caught. Survive what? For the first time, Eve looked almost sad. The air. The room went silent. Claire stepped back. Richard reached for her, but she pulled away. No, she whispered. No, you said your family was different. Richard's voice broke. We are. Claire looked at him, hurt and fear twisting together inside her chest. Then why didn't you tell me? Richard opened his mouth, but no words came out. Before he could answer, the lights on the great hall flickered. Once, twice. Every portrait on the wall seemed to darken at the same time. Amy grabbed Chad's arm. Then from somewhere, deep inside the mansion, a radio crackled. No one moved. There was no radio in the hall. Static filled the air, soft, close, smiling. Claire! The fire went sideways as if the room had taken a breath. A shadow stretched across the far wall, then another. Then the darkness near the locked door began to move. Claire backed away as a shape formed slowly, like smoke, learning how to become a man. Milock stepped out of the dark. The guards around the hall shifted, but no one attacked. Not yet. Milock smiled. Such a beautiful house, Eve, still holding behind stone and old promises. Eve did not move. She did not look afraid. She looked at Milock like she had known monsters older than him, crueler than him. Things that had learned long ago not to mistake her silence for weakness. You were not invited here, Eve said. Milock laughed softly. No, but I was invited by fear, and there's plenty of it in this room. Claire's voice shook. You don't want me. Milock's smile widened. No, Claire. I want what only you can survive. Claire's stomach turned cold. Richard moved in front of her. Stay away from her. Milock's eyes shifted to Richard, amused. You should have claimed her when you had the chance. Claire looked at Richard. Claimed me. Richard's face went pale. Eve's voice cut through the silence. For centuries, women have died trying to carry our bloodline. Human bodies were never meant to hold both life and death at once. Claire turned slowly toward Eve. Eve's expression was calm, but her eyes carried something ancient and wounded. But you, Claire, your blood is different. Claire shook her head no. Richard reached for her again, but stopped himself. Claire looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. Is that why I'm here? Is that why your family saved me? Richard shook his head no. Claire, listen to me. Milock laughed softly from the shadows. They all want the same thing. They just dress it in a softer words. Richard turned on him, rage flashing across his face. I don't care about the baby. The room went silent. Richard looked back at Claire, his voice shaking. I care about you. For a moment, Claire almost believed him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this house, this family, this impossible world of bloodlines and secrets had not swallowed her whole. She had been an orphan her entire life. No mother, no father, no home that truly belonged to her. And now she stood in a mansion filled with ancient faces, protected by people who had been waiting for her, loved by a man who was not fully human, and watched by a monster who wanted what her body could survive. For one terrible second, Claire wondered if this was what belonged felt like. Belonging, not safe, not simple, but chosen. Milock stepped closer to the edge of the firelight. She is still human, he whispered, and until that changes, she can still be taken. The guards moved now, forming a silent wall between Milock and Claire, but Milock did not look afraid, neither did Eve. That was what made the room feel even colder. Eve stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the darkness as if she had faced things like him before, older things, crueler things, things that had learned long ago not to challenge her unless they were ready to bleed. Then she looked over at Richard. Her voice was calm, too calm. You know what you must do. Richard's face hardened. No. Eve's eyes sharpened. We have to save Claire. Richard stepped closer to his mother, fury rising in his voice. Do not ask me to do that. They will hurt her, Richard. Claire looked between them, her heart pounding. What are you talking about? Richard did not answer. He only stared at his mother like she had placed a knife in his hands and asked him to use it. Eve's voice lowered. If Milock takes her before you claim her, she will never be free of him. Richard's jaw tightened. I said no. Milock smiled from the dark. You always were sentimental. Richard turned toward the voice, rage burning through his fear. The fire snapped violently, sparks flying into the air. The radio crackled again. Then there was no radio in sight. Static filled the great hall. Milock's voice came from everywhere at once. Claire. The windows trembled. Amy gasped. Chad pulled her behind him. Richard reached for Claire, but she stood frozen. The voice whispered again, "You should have stayed on the yacht." Eve's face hardened, no fear, no panic, only command. She looked at Richard one final time. "You know what must be done." Richard stared at her furiously. Then the lights went out. And in the darkness, Claire heard Milock whisper, "Then I will take her myself."